meeting. 3 items on the agenda. First of all, let's go through procedure for those that don't know the procedure. We will be on the YouTube Northumberland channel as normal. Members are asked to keep the microphones on mute unless speaking. Switch all mobile phones off. And remember that if a member leaves the chamber whilst an application is being considered, then they may take no further part in the application. The procedure is the Chair will introduce the application and the site visit videos which have been previously circulated. The planning officer will then take us through, the appropriate planning officer will take us through each application. We then have public speaking, objectors and supporters, local members, 5 minutes maximum, and that is enforced quite rigorously. No questions in relation to written representations by a local councillor. We'll then go to the questions to the planning officer by the members. I'll then ask for, once that's finished, I'll ask for a proposal. And if that's seconded, we'll go to a vote. The Chair has the casting vote if that's necessary. And we will keep doing that until we get a resolution. So, apologies for absence.
Yes, Chair, I've received apologies from Councillors Foster, Hill, Renner Thompson and Thorne.
Thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting. Has everybody had a copy of that? And are we happy to approve that? Thank you. Disclosure of members' interests. I believe we've got at least one.
Chair, I declare an interest in the second application, the land at Camerson, East Sleekburn. I'll leave and then hopefully someone will come and get me when we move on. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Item 4, determination of plan applications. The first one is the Verico. Application number 24/02093. Verico, variation of condition 27, noise, pursuant to planning permission 16/04/622/full, to allow acoustic fence in lieu of brick wall to plots 11, 17, 22 to 47, 71 to 78, and 93 to 101, and 113. And Ryan, I believe you're the planning officer for this one.
Yep, thank you, Chair. Just by way of update, there was 2 further objections received from residents following publication of the officer report. These are set out within the handout that's been given to members ahead of the committee. So moving on to the presentation, a variation of conditions is proposed to condition 27 upon approved application 16/04622 FUL on land at Crowfoot Street, Blythe. The condition sought to secure details of a brick wall upon the shared boundary as a way of protecting the amenity of future residents by way of noise and privacy. The application site is located towards the northeastern boundary of Blythe with a number of plots sharing a boundary with the Port of Blythe Bates Terminal and the associated public highways that provide access to the port. The houses have been constructed on site and are now occupied by residents. At present, standard timber fencing is incorporated along this shared boundary, which fails to provide adequate noise or privacy protection for these residents. The applicant now proposes the installation of double-boarded acoustic fence at 2.4 metres high to plots 30 to 35, and the provision of an additional boarding of thick cover panels upon the northern boundaries to plots 36 to 47, 71 to 78, 93 to 96, 96 to 101 and plot 113. This would provide both noise and privacy protection for existing and future residents. The application was accompanied by a noise assessment to support these claims. This slide shows the fencing proposals for plots upon the western and northern boundaries of the site and elevations of the proposed fencing. With this slide showing the fencing proposals for the properties located along the eastern boundary of the application site. These site images show the current on-site arrangement. The entrance to the port of Blythe Baits Terminal can be seen on the second image, along with the existing closed board and timber fencing currently incorporated on the shared boundary behind the metal palisade fencing. And this image is from the adjacent public highway on the western boundary of the site, shows two of the plots where the boundary treatments are proposed to be amended. The application is therefore recommended for approval subject to the amended wording of condition 24 within the officer report. Various conditions from the original application have been removed or reworded due to previously being discharged or being considered no longer relevant. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Eight members. So on this one, it's Josh Murphy.
Thanks, Chair. So I've been asked to speak on behalf of Port of Blythe today concerning yet another attempt by the applicant to overturn the Planning Authority's original decision on this application. The port operates Bates Terminal, situated directly adjacent to the properties affected by this variation application, and benefits from permitted development rights, meaning it can function without the need for significant plan control 24 hours, 7 days a week on a weekly basis, which is supported by local policy and industrial directives. The site boasts enterprise zone status and has been subject to extensive capital investment, including the redevelopment of Bates Clean Energy Terminal. However, the port cannot accept undue restrictions on the operation through the inappropriately mitigated sensitive receptors directly adjacent to their operations. Policy QOP2 of the local plan stipulates that development will be required to provide a high standard of amenity for existing and future users of the development in itself and not cause unacceptable harm to the amenity of those living within, working or visiting the local area. Therefore, to satisfy this policy, an originally appropriately worded condition was attached to the original permission, which consists of two elements. Firstly, the requirement for suitable mitigation measures to ensure a high standard of amenity for existing users of this development, in this case, a barrier of brick wall construction. Thereafter, to ensure longevity of this measure for future users, it had to be in place for the lifetime of the development. As the planning inspector summed up well in the previous appeal, the condition is reasonable and necessary in the interests of the living conditions of the residents of the proposal with regards to noise and privacy and the operation of nearby business uses. To this day, the developers decided to completely ignore these reasonable plan controls, and the development commenced on site in December 2017, which included the erection of a timber fence as boundary treatment, resulting in a breach of planning. To this day, the occupation of these dwellings occurs in breach of this original planning permission. The applicant has complete disregard to the original requirements to protect the operations of the Port of Blythe and the residential amenity of these residents of the affected plots, which both plan officers and environmental health sought to protect in the first place. Members of the public will want to know how a house builder has been allowed to manipulate the plan system in this manner that has been demonstrated here today. And it's also questionable how a discharge of conditions application was ever validated, given it never consisted of the relevant information as per the original condition wording. I'd also ask why robust enforcement action has never been instigated despite a number of breaches. Despite this, serious questions remain regarding the ability of the proposed boundary treatment, and once again proposed. Gleeson's has at one point never contacted the Port of Blythe before submitting any of these applications, therefore cannot take into account the current levels of the site or activities that are undergoing. As such, the basis of such reports, such as the noise assessment from the very beginning, have been questionable. The fact that the noise assessment appears to focus solely on HDVs shows a complete lack of understanding of how the site operates. No consideration has been given, for example, to vessel handling, operation of mobile plant, or unloading of goods vehicles from warehouses and other port uses. Not to mention other possible impacts on amenities such as lights from vehicles breaching into neighbouring gardens and amenity areas. The planning authority is now accepting of the management plan submitted by the applicant. However, it's simply not fit for purpose. A half-a-page document consists of generic throwaway comments and only allows for periodic visual inspections to be undertaken from one side of the fence, which poses significant risk. I quote again from the plan inspector: "Even a small amount of damage can render the protection provided by the acoustic barrier as worthless." I question how someone from a management company who presumably isn't a qualified acoustician can demonstrate or determine how a fence has even a small amount of damage. Also, is it even appropriate for the planning authority to involve a measure within a residential development that requires a third party to visit someone's home and inspect their garden fence every month? I ask members how this would ever ensure the maintenance plan will ensure the highest levels of amenity for current and future occupiers for the lifetime of that development. My final point is that impact on security should be considered when assessing the application. The port has enacted national level security features, and a timber fence proposed by Gleeson's has never been at that level. Therefore, it should be questioned why a less effective treatment should ever have been considered, with absolutely no apparent justification given it's been 6 years of unlawful development. The plan authority is potentially putting current jobs and a potential of 250 more at risk if this is allowed. Therefore, why should we trade the quality of life and the amenity of people in their own homes in favour for a cost-cutting exercise, which will dubbed utterly worthless?
Thank you, George. Well done if that was your thing in the 5 minutes. Supporter Stephen Byrne. Again, Stephen, you've got 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I'll keep it short and brief. I think the plan officer gave a good account of where we're at the moment. The application documents we've submitted have demonstrated a technically feasible solution which deals with all of the acoustic requirements on the site, one which can be implemented, and we've agreed a timescale of 4 months from approval if it was to be approved to complete those works. The management statement that's in there will basically secure the lifetime of development that fence and make sure it's inspected and repaired as necessary. Something which has been rigorously tested from the local authority to make sure that that is implementable and securable, and basically we've come to an agreement that that is the case. So I think if we refer back to the application documents and if everyone's understood them, what we got in front of us today is a solution which is workable, is technically feasible, and deals with all of the issues that's been raised. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Questions to the planning officer? Councillor Watson.
Where do I start? Why, as we as a planning authority, have we not enforced this before now? This has been going on since 2017, and so this demonstrates, like the gentleman's just said in objection to it, about the fact that we're not enforcing conditions that we're putting in. So ultimately, this had a very clear condition of this brick wall, and given the Port of Blythe is expanding and we're very delighted that there's lots of things going on in the port, I would like to know why we haven't enforced something before now, because there's residents living there. Is this purely based on cost from the developer? And how can we be absolutely certain that there's not unacceptable harm to the residents living there?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I'm happy to sort of take that. Yeah, so there has been enforcement proceedings on the site previously since the development was commenced. Our enforcement team have visited the site on a number of occasions and they have sort of progressed the enforcement matters. The history of the site, there's been a number of applications that have been submitted where they seek to vary this condition. Once an application is received by a local planning authority, we can't proceed any enforcement matters until that application's been dealt with. So the time frame of the applications being submitted and the time frame of the enforcement sort of proceedings have sort of conflicted with each other, meaning that sort of as a local planning authority, we haven't been able to progress the enforcement matters to the end. Yeah, to sort of address this. I think in terms of the amenity aspect to residents, I think we're satisfied as a local planning authority from the noise assessment that's been submitted as part of the application and the detailed maintenance plan, that we're satisfied that there is accordance with policy QOP2 of the Northumberland local plan in terms of protecting residents from noise and privacy from the adjacent business activities. But yeah, in terms of the enforcement proceedings, they have been ongoing, but unfortunately never finalised.
Thank you. Councillor Ball?
Thanks, Chair. It's along the same themes, to be honest. So how can we guarantee for the residents that we know that big house builders, small house builders know how to play the system and to stop enforcement happening or to knock it into the long grass, where if you're living there, actually you want to know that things are going to be done about it. If there is noise complaints, is this really a suitable answer? And as a planning authority, we want the economy to grow around here. We're supporting the green energy sector within this place as well. And you know, I just have great concerns. Actually, it's going to be noisier. People are going to live there. Who's going to get the flack? It's not going to be the house builder. It's going to be the Port of Blythe. And actually, they're the ones that are supporting the jobs, the local area and everything else. So what guarantees do we have for the port that they're not going to end up having operational issues, which then has a knock-on effect on the local economy and the jobs that are coming to the area? Because actually, if you're going to have complaints at every opportunity, why don't you go somewhere else? So what's the guarantees from us that the Port of Blythe are going to be supported and that the residents are going to be able to live a long, happy life in the homes that they've not long since bought?
Thank you.
Yeah. Through the chair, I'll answer this one. Part of the delay for this going to committee is that the design has been through a number of applications and iterations. All we can say at the moment is that the acoustic properties of the fence, we've been consulting with our public protection team who have used the national standard technical methodology in evaluating noise, and it meets the requirements. We recognise that this proposal isn't the same one as tabled originally, but if we were to press enforcement with the advice to us that it's technically acceptable, we'd be sort of arguing against ourselves at the moment. Okay.
Happy with that reply, Councillor Ball?
And the other things around supporting Port of Blythe as well?
Yes, I'll answer that one. And what you're talking about is a concept called agent of change, which is a legal principle, okay? And what that basically says is, if you have an existing business, and then you get a noise-sensitive development next to it, if the business is there first, it is on the onus is on the developer of the noise-sensitive development to make sure that those residents aren't unduly affected by the noise, such that there be a statutory noise nuisance. To make it a bit clearer, this issue often plays out in city centres, say where you have bars or nightclubs, they have flats built above them, which can be subject to noise complaints. And if the business is there before, and you grant planning permission for something that hasn't got the appropriate mitigation in place, there can be a statutory noise nuisance. Okay. Without putting words into the port's mouth, what they are saying, I do believe, is that they have a lawful use there, and that use may change and develop over time, and they need to be certain that their expansion or their changes to their operational requirements won't be unduly restricted by noise sensitivity next to the houses. So what we've done is looked at this again with our public protection team and the acoustic specialist in there, saying, will this fence achieve the same aims as a solid wall, which I think committee originally did want. And all we've got at the moment is, after a number of iterations, the public protection specialist has said it will do the job.
Let's have Alex first.
Yeah, thanks. It's continuing the theme with the Port of Blythe. The Port of Blythe, for many years, many generations, have worked with residents on both sides of the river. They have twice a year meetings with each group of residents on both sides of the river. And I can say in my time as 12 years as a Harbour Commissioner, although always supportive of residents, I can never remember a planning application where they supported the residents to stop development. I'm trying to think in particular where they bought a public house, knocked it down. I'm sure Councillor Reid remembers the circumstances, and in place put in huge, the biggest cable reels you've ever seen in your life. And those residents in that area would not be happy about the noise that was coming. So that's why I say the Port of Blythe haven't supported residents in the past, but worked with residents. In this case, although I understand what you're saying about future development, they have not withdrawn their objection. So in other words, the Port of Blythe, 52 businesses on the river, trying to work with everyone, cannot work with this application.
Councillor, you're long in the tooth of this game. You know it's a question.
So my question is, why not?
I'll answer this one. To answer it as succinctly as possible, without putting again the words into any party's mouth, the assertion by the applicant Gleeson is that the provision they are making will protect the interests of the port and its operational requirements, and the port are not convinced by that. I think that was what a reasonable encapsulation of the issue. And the reason why this application has come to committee is because this sort of technical matter generally doesn't make its way to committee. However, I felt strongly that this committee had made the decision on the basis of there being a brick wall, a solid wall there. And this is while it may seem to be a minor technical change, is a change from that. All I can offer in assurance, really, is that the case officers have been through this exhaustively, and Public Protection have said it is acceptable. Okay.
Councillor Watson?
So Ryan, you showed us some views from a lorry looking into the houses, but we didn't get views looking from houses across to the road. Are we confident that this fence is as good as the wall would have been in terms of visual from there? Because at the moment, I see how awful that is for people to have wagons loaded up along that road where they can see directly into houses. And just a second one, sorry. As councillors, fencing blowing down in storms is a massive issue. So how can we be confident that if this fence comes down, it's going to be erected quickly if you're saying that gaps in the fencing will massively affect the acoustics as well?
Yes, so on the first point in terms of the height of the fence, yes, we're satisfied that that will protect privacy as well as sort of amenity. The measurements of the fence are still going to be 3 metres from road level, which was the case with the brick wall. So the height of sort of the double boarded fence is going to mirror sort of what was previously proved in terms of the brick wall. In terms of the second point, in terms of damage or the fence coming down, that was something that we requested be included within the maintenance plan as part of the submission, and that was amended by Gleeson. So there is a strict time frame on that. I'm not entirely sure what it was, but I think it was around sort of 5 working days from the date of that being reported to it being rectified on site. And then if that isn't addressed, that's something that's enforceable by ourselves as a local planning authority. So we're satisfied that sort of all situations where storm damage or impacts to the fence are covered by sort of the maintenance condition.
Any more questions, members? Councillor Reid.
Thanks, Chair. Well, first of all, I'll rattle through the questions then and you can answer them in any order you like. We've heard that there's going to be a lot of care and maintenance on this. Who's going to pay for it? And then, what I'm not clear about here, and it might be in the report and I might have missed it, so I apologise if I have, is the fence or the brick wall, whichever is built, is that actually the residents' wall is at the back of their garden, or do they have a fence, and then this other thing is going to be there as well? And who, if it, well, I suppose I'll have to wait till you answer those two questions first.
So on the first point, in terms of the management and maintenance, that will be done by an external company appointed by Gleasing. So yeah, it won't be sort of Gleasing that will be doing the work, but it will be an external sort of company.
I didn't ask who was doing the work, I was asked who was going to pay for it, and that's a slightly different thing. And I think I know what the answer is, I just want to hear you say it.
Yeah, with the maintenance condition states that that'll be secured by a service fee paid by future residents in terms of...
So, sorry. What you're saying is that the builder is promising that this thing is going to be maintained in perpetuity by the people who live on the estate, who are going to be paying a maintenance fee in perpetuity.
This is separate to the conventional maintenance fee, and this will be secured by legal agreement with Gleeson for them to pay for it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Can I just add very quickly? This is separate from the normal, what we call a maintenance fee, which is normal to do with the looking after of open areas of landscaping, etc. This is a separate matter where Gleeson's will be responsible ultimately for this in perpetuity for the lifetime of the residential development. Okay. So it isn't the residents who are paying for this. Sorry to correct. So Gleeson's will be responsible for this in perpetuity.
Right, and the Gleeson's should go into liquidation or anything like that, what will happen then?
Well, this will go as a charge on the land, and all we can say is that for many issues we secure things by Section 106 or by planning condition, and any scheme or any development which has an in perpetuity requirement is subject, to potentially a company going bankrupt. But that will be true. Can I just add that will be true of a brick wall? Yeah.
And I think there was one other point in terms of the location of the fence. It's the residents' sort of back garden. It's their curtilage. It's the boundary line of the residents.
Sorry, this just gets more and more complicated to me.
Can I just add a point here? We need to differentiate points which are common answers to any question and those which are to do with this scheme. The questions you're asking, there will be a maintenance requirement in perpetuity on a solid wall as well.
I'm not disputing that. I'm just trying to get in my... Sorry, Chair.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get it straight in my head and try and illustrate to the other members of the committee that it's all very well people promising to do stuff, but actually the residents are going to be having to find the money to pay for this. And if I live at 113 and the fence or the brick wall gets damaged at 11, then I am just as, like what you're telling me is that I'm the person living in 113 is just as liable for repairing that fence at 111 is they would be if it.
Chair, can I just, I think we need to be really clear about what we're discussing here and the materiality of the issues being raised. There was a big what-if leap in there in the logic you presented there, with all due respect. Yeah. And that's saying that if the company went bankrupt, the residents would be responsible for it. In front of us, there is a provision for the in perpetuity maintenance of the acoustic barrier. Okay? The question, and I'll, if I may, Chair, focus members' attention on the question is, are you satisfied with a wooden acoustic barrier as opposed to a brick one? And if not, why not? Okay. The question over long-term maintenance, etc., is common to any solution it would be. So therefore, that doesn't differentiate either option, because the permission for the housing development and an acoustic barrier has been granted already, has been implemented. Okay.
Thank you, Rob. I see the point you're trying to make there.
Yeah.
Councillor Watson, on page 33, 718 is the inspection and tasks, occurrence and action breakdown for the question you raised. Any more questions, members? Martin?
Thank you, Chair. Just for clarification, you might not be answering this, but was this wall, in the original application, was this wall proposed by the developer, or was this something that was imposed upon the developer by planning condition?
Yeah. And Chair, can I just say, the original one, the brick design one, and while I certainly wasn't present here for that committee, I understand that at that committee members did discuss this issue and required assurances at the time that it would be a solid wall.
Was that added on as a condition by members?
No, that was part of the eventual scheme. That was required as a part of a response from a consultation for the public protection at the time.
Don't be naughty now, Councillor Watson. You know you've got to ask the questions.
Yeah.
Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Sorry, prolong it about the maintenance. What does maintenance mean? Because I'm thinking of a housing estate in a different local authority area, and they've had their fences up for 20, 30 years, looking a bit draggled and patched everywhere. Is there anything we can actually do, a fence or a wall? Because both of them are going to come at the end of their lives sometime.
Yeah, because this is an explicit requirement on this particular design of fence, because it is not just I won't say ornamental, it's not just a feature of the landscaping design, it is designed to fulfil a particular technical purpose, and that's why it has the particular requirements for maintenance in perpetuity, hasn't it? Yeah.
Thank you. Any more questions, members? I've got a little question that's just come into my head. Was there any particular reason we stipulated a brick wall at the original application? I'm just wondering if there's a reason why we stipulated that and it's still current, then obviously that plays one way. If we stipulate the reason and it isn't still current, then that could play a different way.
I think it, no, sorry. No. Oh. Yeah, could you actually? Yeah, could you introduce yourself first?
Please.
Yeah, you've come to the front. No, you need to be recorded for this.
Can you see that?
So my understanding from the committee minutes, which I've read, are that
I've been told, can you introduce yourself?
Sorry, yes.
And can we make sure you're recorded? It should be recorded there. Yeah.
Gillian Place, Senior Environmental Health Officer, Public Protection.
Thank you.
So the committee minutes from that planning committee state that, the minutes state that Port of Blythe objected to the original application, and also the MP at the time, who I think was Ronnie Campbell. Yeah. And the Port of Blythe only withdrew their objection on the basis that Gleeson agreed to build a solid brick wall, 3 metres construction, and on that basis, Port of Blythe withdrew their objection, and that it was conditioned.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that history lesson. That's interesting. Okay, members, can I have a proposal? Councillor Hutchinson.
Propose refusal on this one, I'm afraid. I think it's going to be safer for the Port of Blythe and for the residents as well to have a brick wall, as was original in the original application. It's been reapplied for twice to have it made wood. It's been appealed twice and lost. They're trying again. I think it boils down to finance at the end of the day. And I think they're just trying to pull the wool over our eyes again. Planners do that. No, planners. Developers do. Planners do that as well, mind. But developers tend to do that. We've said what we wanted. haven't done that again and again, and they're trying again. So I think we should dig our feet in, dig our heels in, and refuse it. Thank you.
Thank you. Have we got a seconder for that? Councillor Watson.
Can we...
Well, can we discuss it first?
Yeah,
Can
discuss
we
it
debate
first. Yeah, so we have to delegate, yeah. Once we hear the debate, we'll know more of the reasons for any possible recommendation.
So let's open it up to debate, members. Councillor Ball.
Thanks, Chair. So, when we go to things, and the three little pigs, they built houses made of straw, made of wood and made of brick. The first two blew down. As a resident spending hundreds of thousands of pounds on my forever home, when you turn around and say something's going to be built at the bottom of my garden, either made of straw, made of wood or made of brick, and you've told me it's going to be made of brick, after I've lived there for a while, and you haven't adhered to the conditions that were put there, no enforcement's happened, and then the cheek of people to come back and say we're going to do something. I understand that it might be acoustically suitable, but it's not what I was promised. And you know, when I completely understand that it might be within the remit, but actually if you spend a lot of money to live there and your expectations and what you're getting are completely wrong, I think we do need to start really digging our heels in with house builders, because how many times have we sat in this chamber and seen conditions removed or variations? And I think, yes, we need houses, but house builders need to remember they're building communities and safe places for people to live, and stop moving the goalpost, because that's what we need. We need safe, happy homes and communities for people to live in.
Can I offer one piece of advice on this? Yeah. So, with all due respect to everyone in the room, can I offer one piece of advice on the line of logic there? Okay. Anyone can make an application at any time, okay, and we are duty-bound to treat it on merit. The fact that an application is different from a previous scheme in itself is not a material reason to refuse it. It would have to be that this new proposal isn't acceptable in its own right, rather than it being different. Okay. Yeah.
It's just, if there's a storm, which we've had more and more, and part of this comes down, actually is it going to be suitable? Yeah. I just think it's not right what was meant to be delivered and what's going to be. And I think one section has it's if you break your toe, it's going to have the effect on your full leg.
Councillor Ball, the thing that worries me, and I'm looking for some guidance on this, is what you're talking about is durability.
Yeah.
And yet we've got a agreement in perpetuity. So it kind of cancels each other out. Is that correct, Rob?
I think it's legitimate to say that the proposal would meet the acoustic requirements, but if you had concerns about its durability, almost notwithstanding any maintenance regime, there could be arguments that it will be down for a greater proportion of time than the brick wall will be down. Okay. However, we do have to have the information in front of us to support the assertion that it would be subject to being blown over more times than a brick walls do fail. And it would. So I do think it's the point of saying that the durability is a concern as opposed to the acoustic performance. Okay.
Okay. Any more? Councillor Durr.
Yeah, I'll respond to Councillor Ball's huffing and puffing. Yes. And being a farmer, you know, you're sort of withheld by costs. Now that shouldn't be in this because it was agreed. And I came in with a completely open mind on this application. You know, I didn't know what the problem, but there's obviously a problem. And if that was my house, I would want a brick wall at the end of the garden rather than a fence. We see these fences, you know, the big panels, was it 3 meters high or something? You know, it's a sail. It's just going to blow down unless it's really well constructed. And even it is well constructed, you know, farmers build brick walls or stone walls for 2 or 3 different reasons. One is shelter, and 2, they don't come down as often as fences. And as fences, the wood only lasts 20, 30 years anyway now. So I have sympathy, and I'll support the refusal.
Any more for the debate? Councillor Swinburne.
I'd like to support that view, really, because as someone who has constructed fences, if you construct a 3-metre solid panel fence that the wind cannot go through, it is susceptible to wind damage. There's a massive wind pressure there. And when it does fail, it won't just be one small section that fails, it'll take down a great length of fence. Brick walls can fail, indeed, but very, very, very unlikely to happen if it's correctly constructed in the kind of time frame we're talking about for the development. And I have a lot of sympathy with the argument that the people who bought these houses on the assumption they were getting a brick wall at the bottom of the garden, separating them from the port, and I think that's what we should try and fulfil.
Thank you. Any more? Councillor Watson.
Just on the 3 metres, I think it's a 2.4 metre fence, is that right? So we are talking about something lower that's the brick wall as well. And I think that needs to be noted, that that's why I'm refusing it, because you're not doing even like for like from brick to...
It's the same height, isn't it?
Brick to fence. 2.4 metres is what the fence is. The brick...
Reference 3 metres from the ground, but it is like for like in terms of height. I think that's what we were told in the
Yeah, could you
Is that
confirm
right?
that?
Yeah, that's
Same
correct.
height.
Yeah, so it's 2.4 metres in height, but due to the ground levels, it's 3 metres from road level.
Right, okay. That clarifies that, but
yeah.
I just wanted to make that point. It's another thing, but obviously I'm wrong on that. But I totally agree with what Caroline said. You know, we are making communities. This is where people live. This is what people have looked at on plans. They've looked at this house, bought that house. And we have other issues on this site as well. And I know that can't come into this, but, you know, these are people's lives, and this is something where this port doesn't just have traffic travelling up and down this road. This has a facility which is world leading in terms of getting vessels in to refuel on that, you know, not far from where these houses are. So there's a lot missing, I think, in here that was detailed in the original application that's not in this application to help support people making their decisions. And I just refuse it on the fact that these residents have been let down.
Oh, okay, Councillor. Any more? Would you like to sum up, Councillor Hutchinson?
I think that's more or less summed up when I proposed it. The reasons, it's going to be very tricky for the reasons. I just hope it is refused because we're trying to look after the residents and look after the Port of Blythe. And as I said before, the original application was for a brick wall. Personally, I think that would be far better anyway than wood, as has been demonstrated by a lot of people. Wood won't last as long as brick. The storms we have had in the past, loads of fences blew down. Some brick walls blew down as well. Mind, they were in a sad state as well. But this will be, I am convinced, will be more of a positive thing for the people, the residents, and for the Port of Blythe. And as I said at the very start, I'm sick of developers trying to pull the wool over our eyes. I think we should be stronger and show them that we mean it. And this, I think, is not the actual, the right thing to do, to put a fence up. Thanks.
Have we got enough if this goes ahead?
Chair, on the assumption that members were to vote for this refusal, we could delegate the wording of the reasons for refusal to myself for you to agree it, that it captured the tone of the conversation. However, we will be basing it on concerns about durability rather than concerns about previous expectation. Okay?
Yeah.
Because that would be a non-material reason. Okay.
Yeah.
The other thing is, I'm not a noise specialist, and I don't understand, you know, the decibels, etc., what it all sounds like. We've had this in licensing a few times about noise or perceived noise, and it's a minefield. I don't think the experts actually know about it properly, So I'm just not convinced that a wood fence is going to work.
Okay then, let's put it to the vote then there. It's just a refusal, isn't it?
Yeah, with work,
if we
with
clarify.
delegation,
Yeah,
they're going to
sorry,
be in
sorry
the chair
members,
for.
just to clarify, so the proposal before you is to refuse the recommendation for the reasons of durability with delegated authority to the Director of Planning and consultation with the Chair to determine the exact wording of that in line with what's been discussed today.
Okay.
Are you happy with that? All those in favour of that proposal to refuse them? All those against? There'll be no abstentions. Thank you.
Okay.
That's refused. Next application. Councillor Stewart, I didn't miss you out there, did I?
Nope.
Thank you.
No, Councillor.
Thank you. The next application is 23/04110/out. Onshore export cables, converter station and associated grid connection for Berwick Bank onshore wind farm. And it's Ryan again.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just another update on this application. Following publication of the officer report, there have been minor amendments to the wording of conditions 27 and 38. These amended conditions have been circulated to members in the handout ahead of the committee. Also, just one other point, the front page of the officer report shows an incorrect red line boundary for the site. This was reduced by the applicant during the course of the planning application, but the correct version is included within the presentation today. So moving on to the presentation, outline planning permission is sought for the provision of onshore export cables, a converter station and the associated grid connection for the Berwick Bank offshore wind farm on land at Camerson, East Sleekburn. The application submitted an outline form, so all matters are to be reserved as part of this submission, meaning access, appearance, landscaping, layout and scale are not being considered as part of this submission. That's the correct red line boundary for this site. The application details a large red line boundary which covers extensive areas of Camas extending into East Sleekburn. The applicant has proposed a significant area as the detailed design and final placement of the cables has not yet been finalised. An amendment to the red line boundary was received during the course of the application, which excluded the majority of the NEP3 site from the proposals. This slide gives an indicative overview of the proposed development zones. The purple layer indicates the landfall HVDC zone, whereas the dark green layer indicates the HVAC zone with the export cables expected to run through both areas. The light blue layer to the west shows the converter station zone. These site photographs show views from land within Camas, standing at the eastern boundary of the site, facing westwards. These site photographs show views from land adjacent to Camas Primary School. As noted within the update, mitigation strategies to be secured via condition to negate any adverse impacts upon the school playing fields. These site photographs show views facing north from the Camas Primary School, and the second image shows the location of the proposed converter station zone, which is currently screened by extensive soft landscaping. Finally, these images show the proposed HVAC zone from the adjacent highway facing south, and the existing Camas Primary School and its playing fields to the north and south. The application is recommended for approval subject to the updated conditions issued to members ahead of the committee presentation. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you.
Yeah, Chair, can I just add one quick thing? The reason why this is coming to committee because technical matters like this often do not for engineering operations, is that at certain points in the routes of the cabling, it affects land within it where the county council has an interest in it. So for transparency, that's why it's a committee item.
Thank you. Once again, we have Speaker, Mr. Simon Hinson. You've got 5 minutes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon, members. I'm Simon Hinson. I'm a lead onshore consent manager with SSE Renewables, acting on behalf of Berwick Bank Wind Farm, who are the applicant. We welcome the opportunity for our application to be heard at Strategic Planning Committee and thank the officers across the council who have worked on the application to bring forward the recommendation to approve outline planning permission. The application in front of you today is for determination of the onshore transmission infrastructure for Berwick Bank Offshore Wind Farm. The offshore wind farm itself is located 39 kilometres off the east coast of Scotland and is the largest offshore wind farm in development in the UK. There are additional grid connections at Branxton and East Lothian, which were granted planning permission last year. The delivery of the Berwick Bank wind farm and its grid connections are a significant part of the UK's journey towards net zero and tackling climate change. The offshore wind farm and the onshore elements to the offshore wind farm and the offshore elements to the grid connections are covered by separate applications to the Marine Management Organisation and Marine Scotland. Following National Grid identifying Blythe Substation as our grid connection point through their holistic network design process, we undertook a site selection process, engaged with the local community, and undertook an environmental impact assessment to establish the maximum design parameters for our development, and they're the ones that you see in front of you today. These assessments established Camas as the landfall location, with up to 4 underground high-voltage direct current cables to bring the electricity from the wind farm to shore and connect to a converter station located within the NEP2 site, adjacent to the North Sea Link substation. Once the development is complete, the converter station will be the only above-ground infrastructure as part of the scheme and will bring forward landscape and visual mitigation for the substation, including through layout and design of the buildings and use of new and existing landscaping, the detail of which will be brought forward through reserved matters applications. From the converter station, there will be 12 underground high-voltage alternating current cables, which will connect the development to the National Grid's Blythe substation located to the south of Brock Lane. Mitigation to minimise the impacts on people and wildlife in the local area had been established through the EIA, and through detailed design of the development will refine how this will be delivered, working with the community and council officers to minimise the impact of the development. As noted in the officer's report, the effects of the development will largely be in the construction phase, which will last approximately 3 years, and we're committed to the mitigation set out in the EIA and the planning conditions contained within the report, with the modifications that you've had circulated to you as well today. Specifically, we'll be working with the school estates team to minimise and mitigate construction impacts on Camas First Primary School's playing fields. And the underground cables will be installed through a combination of open-cut trench techniques and, where appropriate, trenchless technologies, such as horizontal directional drilling, will be used to avoid impacts on sensitive sites and infrastructure, such as the Northumberland Coast SSI. We'll also ensure that we have dedicated contacts to allow the community to feed back to us during the construction period, and we will respond to any matters of concern that arise as appropriate. In advance of and following submission of the application, we've worked with council officers and adjacent proposed developers, including post-submission reducing our red line boundary to help move forward other developments in the area, including the proposed data centre. We'll continue work with other developers to maximise the benefits for the local area while minimising the impacts for the community through the implementation of robust mitigation for construction impacts, particularly those related to noise, dust and traffic. We'll also seek to maximise benefits to the local area through use of our Sustainable Procurement Code, which places an expectation on our suppliers and contractors to maximise opportunities for local businesses and people. If outline planning permission is granted today, we'll move forward with the detailed design of each element of the development, engage with the community prior to bringing forward the reserved matters applications. And again, thank you for the opportunity to speak at the committee today.
Thank you very much. Okay, members, questions to the officers? Any questions? Barry?
Might sound like I'm asking a question which I already know the answer to, but can it be confirmed that this application would not be coming here today if there was no involvement of land within Northumberland County Council having a bit of an interest in?
Yeah, in the normal, through the chair, in the normal way of things, this type of application would not come to committee, and it would be regarded as, an engineering matter that we would handle as a delegation. However, there is the issue that it does affect land with the county council interest, but also it is a very large scheme as well. So on that basis, it was appropriate to be dealt with by.
So it might have come here just because it was a large scheme anyway.
Very scale,
Right, okay, that's fine.
Yeah. If there'd been any outstanding technical concerns as well, but actually this one has been with us for quite a while, and we've worked through all the technical matters such that it is now satisfactory.
Thank you. Councillor Hall.
I know it says in the report about that the transport and highway stuff isn't really part of this, but I am concerned it is the school site right in this area as well, so just that the mitigations are in place to be able to support the school and the people that attend that school to be safe.
Yeah.
Yeah, Councillor, with it being an outline, it's the principle. In highway terms, the principle acceptable. We've recommended the condition for construction method statements, etc., and we will look at obviously minimising any impact of construction movements on the school and other receptors, the Camas itself and East Sleekburn, and try and concentrate it on Brock Lane as best we can and get it off the network.
Councillor Wallace.
Thanks, Chair. Chair, having had NSL build a converter station in the area and dug up all the fields and all the roads, etc., I'm quietly confident residents will be used to that kind of disruption, except that building a new housing estate immediately opposite where the converter station's planned, called the Pastures in East Sleekburn. I haven't seen any acoustic barriers going up, but that's another story. So my question is simple. Although it's fine to say the converter station will go in a coloured section, can you tell me exactly where in that coloured section and what size is it in comparison to the NSL converter station? And that'll help me picture the size of that building. Thank you.
Yeah, that's something that will be considered at reserve matters stage. So with this application being submitted in outline form, matters in relation to sort of scale and layout aren't considered as part of this submission. So if the application were to be approved today, the applicant would then have to submit a reserve matters within a specific time frame, which would then demonstrate the scale, the height, the layout of any proposed build form. And then we would consider that in terms of the impact on amenity. So yeah, that will be considered under a separate planning application.
Thanks, Ryan. And can I follow, Chair, if I may, because I know residents of East Sleekburn will be glued to Northumberland TV to find out, when you mention reserve matters, does it come back to committee or do you do that behind closed doors?
Yeah, can I answer that one? That's a good question. There's no one answer to that. Reserve matters, if they are coming and they are wholly uncontroversial, they will be handled by delegation. If there are matters, say for example the replacement of a wooden fence from a brick one, that touch on matters that were subject for debate at committee, then it will return to committee. And we do handle reserve matters applications at committee sometimes. Okay.
Councillor Swanman.
Thank you, Chair. Was just because obviously we don't normally see this kind of thing. Why is it such a large area when it's essentially a wire that's going to come into a building?
It's because when the detailed work is done, including all the intrusive ground investigations, and you heard from the public speaker that a combination of trenching and horizontal boring will be used. As more details come to light, there may be the need for a fairly broad construction area to allow it to be built safely, and also some variability into its precise path. Okay. This isn't like running an extension cable a long distance. It is a very substantial piece of kit in terms of, even though it is cabling. So the actual works to bury it are fairly substantial. Okay.
Any other questions? Can I just mention something then? Probably playing devil's advocate a little bit, but Rob, in your answer to Councillor Reid, Councillor Flux, you said it was a substantial application. And yet, in the answer to Councillor Wallace, you said that the reserve matters bit and the detail could be considered as a delegated decision.
Yeah.
How come there's a difference between those?
Because this application will have several reserve matters with it, some of which could be extremely minor technical matters, and other ones could raise more substantial issues. So if it did raise a substantial issue, it would come to this committee. But for, say, a minor technical element that didn't generate any adverse comments from statutory consultees or third parties, then that would be delegated.
Okay, thank you. Any questions anymore? Can I have a proposal then? Councillor Darwin.
Yeah, I'd like to propose the officer's recommendation to grant the application.
Councillor Stewart, seconded? Yeah.
Correct, yeah, as handed out, yes.
Debate. Anybody want to talk to the debate on this? Councillor Wallace.
Thanks, Chair. Chair, since the application came in, I have to say SSE has been nothing but exemplary with the community. They've had presentations and meetings with great regularity with the parish council. They had a public event, and only last week I was contacted by somebody from SSE. Would I like a private meeting with them to discuss any issues? Would I have any questions? I had 3 questions. One, for example, and I must be honest, I thought somebody would have raised it tonight, is the data centre part and parcel of this? And the answer is no. It's got nothing to do with it at all. Nothing at all. You know, I say that in case the viewers from East Sleekburn are watching, just to make it clear to them. But the point is, they really have been extremely helpful, and I'm quietly confident that with the expert head at Camas School won't only be looked after, they will thrive working with SSE, because part of their planning includes community working together, and I can only say there's been a great benefit for the whole of the Camas area.
Excellent, thank you for that, Councillor Wallace. Any more? We'll go to a vote then. Yeah, do you want to sum up, Councillor Darwin?
No, I don't think there's any more to say, just I agree with that, yeah.
All those in favour? Looks to be unanimous.
Okay. Great.
Thank you. Are you going to get
A quick comfort break before the
yes,
next item, because it's a substantive item.
Yep. We'll have 5 minutes comfort break then. Yep. Which is application number 22//1909/CCMEIA, which is a proposed extraction of 2.8 million tonnes of dolerite, importation of inert infill material, and associated highway and landscape works. And Gordon, you're the planning officer for this one.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. There's a couple of updates. There's even an update to the update. There was from 4:48 today. There's actually a 5th further representation has been received since the committee papers were circulated. All relate to issues which have been taken into account in assessing the proposal. I'll just mention 2 of them, though. There's a representation from an organisation called Plant Life, which includes reference to the area of wax caps on the site, and that's dealt with at paragraphs 773 and 777 of the report. This matter will also be considered in discharging the relevant planning condition. You know, so it doesn't raise anything that hasn't been considered, but it is relevant to note that it will be considered further in discharging the relevant planning commission. And the one that's been submitted this afternoon was from an organisation called Bug Life, and they've raised concerns about the white-clawed crayfish downstream in the River Wansbeck, and that's been dealt with in paragraphs 7.81 to 7.83 of the report, where you'll notice that the Environment Agency originally lodged a holding objection on that subject, but then subsequently withdrew it following the receipt of further information, mitigation measures, assurances, and the imposition of an appropriate planning condition. The other three representations received since then were all from local residents and raising a variety of matters that have been dealt with in the report and in the list of representations that's been mentioned. There's a slight change to the recommendation. I mean, I'll read this out now, but I'll also read it out at the very end. So the recommendation, if we can change the recommendation on page 121 to read as follows: that the application be granted permission subject to the conditions set out in the report and subject to a Section 106 agreement to secure the off-site ecological mitigation land and the visibility splay land. So the two reasons for that are, one, it's to make the recommendation consistent with the draft Section 106 agreement that is currently before the two sets of solicitors, because that's the wording that's used there. And it also removes reference to highway agreements, because highway agreements are secured through conditions and don't have to be finalised prior to the issuing of a decision. You'll have noted that the various highway conditions do require things to be done prior to commencement of development, but not prior to the issuing of the decision. So that's just a couple of updates. So that's the site. It's approximately a kilometre southwest of Kirkwelkington, about 1.5 kilometres west of the A696 road, relatively isolated from local properties. The nearest properties are farmsteads, 3 farms to the north, 188 metres to the north, north side, which is to the west, southwest, 285 metres away, and then West Harrow to the south is also about 605 metres away. Existing site features, not a very illuminating plan, apologies for that, but it's 28.7 hectares of predominantly pastoral agricultural land. You can see the red line boundary there. So the red line boundary includes the access road which would link the site along the U5102 road to the A696. So quite a considerable length of road, as members that attended the site meeting yesterday would have seen. The main elements of the proposal: the extraction of 2.8 million tonnes of dolerite over 20 years in 4 phases. Rather unusually for a hard rock quarry, the proposal is to return the land to the existing ground levels at restoration, and there's lots of detail in the report as to why the applicant wants to do that. In order to do that, it would require the importation of about 800,000 tonnes of inert infill material. You'll have noted the application was submitted in 2022. There's been extensive discussions and changes since then. The original proposals were for a 4 million tonnes extraction and 1.3 million tonnes of imported material over 25 years. So quite a considerable reduction, both in the amount of material to be extracted, the time scale, and the amount of infill restoration material. Extensive discussions on access issues have revised proposals to improve the U5012 road, and these will involve its widening, its creation of passing places, and an improved junction with the A696 road. The average daily heavy goods vehicle movements are 46 in and 46 out, 92 movements in total. On Saturdays, reduced working hours, and it's 30 in and 30 out. These are average, and you'll have seen that there is a condition that recommends a daily maximum with an average over a longer period. There's been extensive discussions on ecological issues, and these were really the main reasons for the considerable delay in bringing this application to committee. So these have resulted in part of the original proposed site not being worked to protect habitats of ecological value, and some, oh dear, some off-site, apologies, some off-site mitigation. Sorry, is there any water or anything? Sorry, it's okay, I've got some. Leslie, I've got some. You with a comedy voice. Some off-site mitigation secured by a Section 106 agreement and a 30-year aftercare period. The site is allocated for mineral extraction in the Northumberland local plan, a slightly different site, but only marginally so, really, compared to the site that is allocated in the Northumberland local plan. The site would be worked in phases, as I've said. It would start in phase 1A in the southwest, then it would work in a northerly direction, and then in an easterly direction. 4 phases, approximately the same amount of tonnage to be worked in each phase, and approximately the same amount of time to be taken to sort of work each phase. So about 700,000 tonnes in each phase, and about 5 years of working in each phase. So that would be phase 1 down in the southwest, and that's where the site compound would be located. The access off the U5012 road, you can see there, into the site compound, and there's a plan later on that shows the various aspects of facility that would be included in the site compound. It's then worked in a northerly direction. Soils obviously are stripped and stored in overburdened subsoil and topsoil mounds. It then works in an easterly direction. I think the total depth of goes down to around about 14 metres, and then it continues to work. It finally work in at the far eastern side, again with a subsoil mound on the the southeasterly boundary. So the sort of the proposals for sort of working would be that there would be drilling involved, but most of the actual working, including the screening of the material, would take place on the base of the quarry at the void, and that would help to mitigate things like noise and dust. Other various environmental effects from the site would be mitigated by having these activities worked on the quarry floor. That's the site compound. Includes an office, a weighbridge. It would include a wheel wash, which members were interested in yesterday. There's a material stocking area, plant and HGV parking, and maintenance and storage area. Various photographs of the site. That's the quarry site from the road to north side. North side, which is to the southwest of the site. So that's looking in a northerly direction, and the site is in the sort of middle distance beneath the horizon. On the horizon is three farms. On the sort of land to the right of that U5012 road is part of the ecological mitigation area that wouldn't be worked. The western boundary of the site is the wall that you can see going up on the left-hand side of that photograph. The sort of site has been slightly, well, there have been some workings in the past. Members saw these yesterday in the southern part of the site, that there is evidence of some previous workings quite close to the access point. This is where the site access would be, and it looks over the site to 3 farms on the horizon. Interestingly, from 3 farms, you don't actually have any view of the site workings because of the lie of the land. So you're sort of looking at this from a slightly elevated position, but 3 farms is an elevated position, but the topography slopes up from 3 farms and then down, so there is no visibility of the site from 3 farms. Again, this is the same sort of site, same sort of view, looking a bit more towards the east, and it has Kirkwelpington on the horizon. As the report points out, there are no direct views into the site from Kirkwelpington, again because of the lie of the land and because of intervening vegetation. This is the access road. So on the left-hand side there, you've got the area that was originally going to be worked, but is no longer going to be worked, where for ecological reasons, the site beyond that, and then on the right-hand side of the road, you've got the ecological mitigation area. That's another view of the ecological mitigation, ecological enhancement area south of the U5012 road. And that's an area that's currently under stewardship, and it would be managed for ecological purposes. So grazing would be avoided. There would be a sort of whole variety of nature conservation controls that would be put into place on that particular piece of land. And that's to, to compensate for some of the loss of habitats during site working. The access point at the junction of the U5012 and the A696, that would be improved up to the Highway Authority's required standards. Basically, that gate would have to be put back further up the road in order to avoid any queuing of heavy goods vehicles back onto the road, and there would be various other improvements made. But as far as the Highways Authority is concerned, it is an access that sort of meets their requirements in terms of visibility to the north and south. That's the restoration plan. That's the sort of broad plan that would be the subject of the condition, but the conditions do require more detailed restorations plan to sort of be submitted later on over the working life of the site. It would be restored to a variety of habitats, and these habitats are referenced at various places in the committee report. The restoration plan has been agreed as appropriate by the county ecologist. In conclusion, it must be remembered that it's EIA development, and the submissions in the ES and the proposed mitigations have been assessed and taken into account in the consideration of the proposals. 2.8 million tonnes of dolerite over a 20-year period, contributing to the supply of aggregates from a site that is allocated in the Northumberland local plan. 800,000 tonnes of
inert restoration materials imported to restore land to the original contours. The economic benefits of the scheme are afforded significant weight in the planning balance in line with government planning policy. The economic benefits are detailed in the report. They mainly relate to the supply of 2.8 million tonnes of dolerite, but there are other economic benefits relating to employment that would take place on the site and in the transport of the materials and in downstream in the various activities that the material would be used for. The assessment of the application has identified that the proposals would result in some landscape and visual harm, but the adverse effects are considered to be localised and to be limited. The ecological implications and the access proposals in particular have been afforded careful scrutiny following initial objections, and revised proposals are considered to be acceptable, subject to the imposition of planning conditions and the satisfactory conclusion of a Section 106 agreement and various highway agreements that are secured by conditions. Other effects, they're detailed in the report, things like noise, dust, are acceptable or can be made acceptable through appropriate mitigation or the imposition of planning conditions in accordance with the relevant policies in the Northumberland Local Plan and the NPPF. So the conclusion is that the benefits are considered to outweigh the limited harm. The officer recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to the conditions and the satisfactory conclusion of the Section 106 agreement. And then just to repeat the slightly revised wording of the recommendation, that the application be granted permission subject to conditions set out in the report and subject to a Section 106 agreement to secure the off-site ecological mitigation land and the visibility splay land. I didn't explain what visibility splay land is. In creating the passing places, which came quite late in the process because highways required an additional number of passing places and also longer passing places in order to sort of cope with the proposed traffic movements. It meant that some of the visibility splay land that was required for that falls outside the red line boundary. Therefore, both the ecological mitigation and the visibility splay land required for the passing places need to be covered by the Section 106 agreement. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, we're on to public speaking, and objector is Philip Lawless. As before, Philip, you'll have up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening. I've been asked to summarise the concerns of our community who have objected to this development. I'm a senior consultant in large power station developments, and I'm amazed at the low standards that appear to have been held for this development, especially on noise. The site was included in the local plan late in the process, and most people, including the parish council, were not aware of it until after the plan was published in April 22, just before the application was made. The absence of site-specific disclosure or consultation with the community in respect of the plan means there has been no trust in the process, reinforced by the applicant's performance to date. This site should have no prior status, and its inclusion in the plan should be given no weight for the purpose of this application. We note the applicant has argued its presence within the plan constitutes outline permission. If the council gives full weight for the site being in the plan, we regard this as a failure of due process and attempt to use the plan to circumvent community disclosure in respect of outline permission. The red line boundary, as indicated, is 800 metres from the village. The village is downwind of this site, so we're rightly concerned about noise and dust that will be created from blasting, rock crushing, mineral movement and the 92 vehicle movements per day. There are also concerns about the waste material, which will be used for backfill. As indicated, there's been no assessment of this material by the authority. There are very few inert materials, and therefore landfill will have an adverse impact. The landfill of stone, concrete and brick will also reduce recycling of these materials, increasing the carbon footprint of this development. North East Concrete have noise issues at their Berkeley plant. They have argued with Gateshead Council that residential encroachment means that they have preferential rights. On this basis, we ask the committee to acknowledge our incumbent preferential rights to our amenities. The applicant suggests, with support from the planning officer, that it will create jobs and improve the supply of stone. There is no supporting evidence that the current 41 years of reserves are unsecure, and there is no increased market for stone. In reality, this development will either be uneconomic or will simply displace the jobs and production from other nearby quarries. This does not warrant the destruction of our environment, which will never be repaired by an uneconomic development. The applicant has consistently undervalued the biodiversity importance of the site and has tried to paint a picture of a rural wasteland. It would be fair to say the applicant has been dragged kicking and screaming into producing a statement which is vaguely compliant. This does not bode well for future compliance, as we've heard from many developers, when profits are at stake, just like water companies. River contamination remains a serious risk for the crayfish population. Priority moorland and grassland habitats will be lost. Rare fungi will be permanently lost, and several bird species breed on this site, which are of conservation concern. These lost habitats will be very difficult to recreate, and any success will be long after we're all gone. There is also no financial security that the restoration will be done. The quarry will be visible, and the impact statement confirms that it will have a significant adverse effect on the character of the landscape. There are many other road safety issues also to be addressed. We urge you to consider the large number of objections to this application. We also ask you to consider how you would feel if there was a new quarry proposed 800 metres upwind from your own home. This is a bad, poorly developed project with no economic value to the community, to the county, or to the country, and brings with it destruction of local amenity, transport links, habitat and biodiversity, as well as increasing UK greenhouse emissions. I urge you, if you have any concerns, to not to approve this application. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. And we have a speaker from Ponteland Town Council, Alan Hall. Again, Mr. Hall, you've got 5 minutes from when you start.
Afternoon, Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. My name is
Can you? Yep. There you go.
Fine, start again.
Yep.
Good afternoon, Chair and ladies and gentlemen. My name is Alan Hall. I'm a Ponteland Town Councillor and Deputy Mayor of the Town Council. I'm thanking you for this opportunity to present the concerns of Ponteland Town Council to this Strategic Planning Committee. I can advise that the Town Council accepts the broad principle of this proposal as something that's acceptable. However, it does not automatically follow that planning permission should be granted by this Strategic Planning Committee. The Town Council's central concern is the impact of the significant increase in HGV movements through the parish along the A696. We've noted that Belsay Parish Council has raised similar objections and concerns about the impact of traffic movement. The criterion within the NCC policy frameworks require that you give full and proper consideration to the transport implications of this major development. The policies I'm referring to are MIN1, TRA1 and TRA2. It's accepted that the amended proposal would result in a reduction in the level and timescales of the extraction, but the report suggests that there would still be an average of 46 loaded HGVs accessing and leaving the site Monday to Friday, and around 30 accessing and leaving the site on a Saturday. It's a matter of major concern to Ponteland Town Council that the proposed development could lead to an increase of HGV traffic through Ponteland of 44% southbound and 33% northbound. 44 in my book is almost 50% increase in HGV traffic movement, which is major. We're asking you to consider the impact of this huge increase on the issue of congestion, the question of road accidents and general safety on the stretch of the A696 that concerns us as it runs through Ponteland. We accept that the A696 is a primary route, but for the people of Ponteland, it's a central hub of the community, with shops, restaurants and access to the local park. It is used daily by people ranging from toddlers to pensioners. We're urging you to pause this application and to consider a detailed assessment of the transport implications as is required by the local plan. If you are still minded to approve the application, we're asking you to consider an amendment. The current planning condition on HGVs entering and leaving the site only relates to an average movement over a 12-month period. We're urging you to place much tighter constraints on the period movements, to consider limits possibly on a weekly or monthly basis, so that the contractor isn't able to distort the allowance that you're giving through these conditions. Overall, the Ponteland Town Council is requesting that the application is refused as a result of the clear conflict with the development plan policies that I've referred to, namely MIN1, TRA1 and TRA2. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And the final speaker today, Sam Thistlewaite.
Thank you, Chair. And good afternoon, everybody. I'm Sam Thistlewaite. I'm a planning consultant. I'm working on behalf of North East Concrete, and I'm joined by David Blakelock, Managing Director of North East Concrete, and John Briggs, Estates Manager for North East Concrete. I'd like to thank the planning officers for their positive and constructive approach throughout the determination of the application. It's resulted in a very thorough committee report which supports the presentation this evening. The committee marks a culmination of a consultation process that started over 5 years ago, in 2019, when the Northside site was first proposed to the Council as part of the emerging local plan. Several sites were put forward for allocation by multiple operators and landowners. The majority of them were not taken forward. As part of the allocation process, assessments were undertaken by key council consultees, including highways, heritage, ecology, and environmental health specialists as well. The decision to allocate the site was based on the site's good access to the main road freight network, avoiding the need to use the smaller B roads that cross the county, coupled with its isolated location. Through the local plan process, the site was subject to multiple rounds of consultation and assessment, following which it was then subject to a detailed interrogation by the planning inspectorate at the examination in public. At no stage during any statutory or at any stage during that process did any statutory or non-statutory consultees, parish councils or local residents object to the site's allocation. Following that process, the inspector and in turn the Secretary of State agreed with the council that the site should be brought forward for minerals development and allocated as a preferred area within the adopted plan in order to meet the county's needs for construction aggregates over the local plan period. The applicant consciously waited for the local plan adoption process to conclude before submitting an application, prior to which a public engagement event was held with the local parish council and the wider local community. Whilst the site was allocated, we accept that this was a starting point for an eventual application and that further refinement of the site design would be required. And this did occur with the detailed discussions taking place with the ecological officers in particular to ensure the scheme was the best it possibly could be. The result of which is the scheme that is in front of you this evening. It's a project that has stood off a large part of the southern end of the site in order to retain a number of grassland habitats, as well as providing a significant area on the other side of the road for off-site ecological enhancement to be managed for the lifetime of the site's operation. Members who visited the site yesterday will appreciate the site's secluded location within an isolated valley, severely limiting the proposal's impact on the wider landscape. There is no intervisibility between the site and any properties in Kirk Wellington. The site is over 1 kilometre away from Kirk Wellington, which alongside the planning conditions proposed and the good practice of the applicant will ensure the site will have no effect upon the amenity of the village. We are aware that there have been a number of objections from properties in Kirk Wellington, and in some cases multiple objections, including those from abroad being channelled through a single property in the village. We understand the concerns that have been raised, but we believe a lot of these have been based on a perception of the project rather than being based on the technical assessments that have been provided. Through the proposed site liaison committee, which will be secured through condition, the applicant is confident that it will be able to demonstrate that those concerns were unfounded. We do note that Kirk Wellington Parish Council have not objected to the proposals tonight. The application is significant for North East Concrete, a regional business that currently employs a large number of Northumberland residents. If approved, the project allows the company for the first time in its history to source its own hard stone, meaning that it is no longer reliant upon aggregates from other quarries, all of which are owned and operated by multinational organisations. The project will allow the company to create at least 20 new long-term jobs, which will include a number of apprenticeship roles. The scheme will allow the North East firm to extract Northumberland mineral resources to support regional construction projects. It's on the basis of the above that we respectfully ask the members to support the officer's recommendation tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, members. Just before I ask the questions, I'd like to thank the members who turned up for the site visit yesterday. And I know other members can't make it for one reason or another, but it was very informative and we had first-hand knowledge of what we're talking about now. We could see what the thing was. So with that, any questions to the planners? Councillor Stewart.
Yes, thank you, and I'll echo your comments there. Quite a large file been reading here, and the visit yesterday was very informative, and we've got a lot of points covered there. I was writing some notes, and the last speaker there took the words out of my mouth, really, but Kirk Wellington Parish Council haven't objected. They've made some comments about that. I'll leave it up to the officers to say anything there. 175 objections. I was querying where they were from. Linking into the point which is made by the Parish Council that there hasn't been any real consultation in the area. I don't know if that's correct or not. And can you outline as well, sorry Chair, there's quite a lot of questions here, outline the previous use of the site and when that finished? And in the area, being local-ish, I realise that there has been a lot of quarries in that area for many years. How many are still going? And do you know roughly when the ones started and finished? And I'll come back later on if I may, Chair.
Thank you. Have you got them written down, Councillor Stewart?
Can I come in on one point there? You asked a question about, effectively, where did the objectors live who made objections? Could I advise committee most strongly that you have to look at the issues raised, and those are summarised in the report. It is neither the number of objections or where they live. So they could all live very distant from the site or very close to it. It is the materiality of the points they are making that you should place weight on. Okay.
If I can just qualify that, Chair. Yep. The reason I was asking that was because the Parish Council hasn't objected. There seems to be a lot of objections. If there's major concern from people throughout the country elsewhere, I think that is relevant. Thank you.
Yes, I mean, there's no objection from the Parish Council. The Parish Council has raised some issues, and there is a section in the report, which is quite unusual, but I've included a section in the report commenting on some of the issues raised by the Parish Council, because one of the Parish Council's concerns, which was reiterated by them yesterday at the site visit, was that they'd had problems with enforcement of a planning issue in Kirk Wellington. Not material really to sort of the consideration of this application, but it is relevant to note that mineral sites are much more, well, they sort of last over a long period, 20 years, but they are subject to close monitoring by the Mineral Planning Authority. Operators pay the Mineral Planning Authority for monitoring visits, and the County Council does both scheduled and unscheduled visits. I was concerned at some of the comments that were made about lack of engagement between the applicant company and local people. I mean, I only inherited this application when David Love left in March. You know, I had no knowledge of that, but based on what they said and based on experience in other quarries in Northumberland, what Kevin and I have recommended here, including in the condition, and we've got the agreement of the operator, is that a community liaison committee is established. Now that will serve its normal purpose to engage dialogue between operator, county council, parish council and local residents, both on what's been happening at the quarry and what might happen in the future. It doesn't prevent people from contacting the operator or the county council with complaints, but it does serve as a useful focus for the discussion of these complaints. And I think Councillor Riddle reinforced that yesterday. He's the chairman of the Divot Hill Liaison Committee, and he reinforced the sort of usefulness of that. And that's why I think in this particular case, and I have no knowledge, you know, direct knowledge of whether the operator, you know, has done less or, you know, less consultation than perhaps might have been expected. But certainly going forward, I think that very much serves to address some of the concerns that Kirkwelpington Parish Council have made and that other local residents have made. So it's a twin-pronged approach to enforcement and monitoring through visits, complaints and discussion at a liaison committee. Just to follow up Rob's point, I mean, I know how many objections came from local people, how many came from people living further away, but what you need to consider is that even if an objection comes from somebody living further away, I mean, that person might have spent 50 years living in Kirkwelpington and recently moved to Devon. So, as Rob said, it's very much what are the issues that objectors are raising, notwithstanding where they might live. And in your papers, there's a long list of issues that local people and others have raised, and there is a similar list of matters that people who have written in support of the application have raised. You sort of asked what the site was previously worked for. I mean, it's been agricultural, low-grade agricultural land, you know, used for grazing purposes, I would imagine. But, you know, as you saw on site, it's, you know, if it is, I mean, it isn't, if it is used for grazing purposes, it's pretty low-grade agricultural land. At some stage in the past, there has been some quarrying activity, not extensive, not deep. You know, as much as we know about that is what we saw on site yesterday, in that there is some whinstone outcrops at the southern part of the site. When did that take place? I've got no knowledge, and I don't think the operator has any knowledge, but it's probably, you know, a long time ago. How many quarries are still going? Well, as has been said, I mean, there is a significant amount of hard rock reserves in Northumberland. Mr. Lawless referred to 41 million tonnes or 41 years, and we're aware of that. But again, in the report, there is a section of the report why you need to look broader than just how much reserves exist. You need to look at whether these reserves are likely to be operated, and some of the quarries that reserves exist in are mothballed and are not likely to sort of reopen. A very large proportion of Northumberland reserves is in one quarry, and government policy on minerals advocates competitiveness in the market and says that it is a legitimate consideration to consider new operators coming forward and having the ability to compete. And one of the things that the applicant spokesman referred to was the fact that this is a local company. It isn't a multinational company, and it does have a commitment to the local area. I don't know if I've covered all your questions. I might have missed something.
I'm sure I'll think of some later. Thank you.
Councillor Ball.
Thanks, Chair. It's just for some clarity around the highways. So earlier on, there were some concerns raised around the junction. And then later on, some of the objectors have stated alternative routing. And I'm just wanting some reassurance that it is safe, because we've seen if you turn left, as in go straight onto the carriageway, or go across two carriageways to turn right, how safe that is and the impact it would have if there was an accident, because that just closes that whole stretch of road and will have an impact on the town. So I'm just wondering, are we 100% happy with the safety aspect of it, and that it is suitable for the long-term use as well? Because once we start with lorries coming in and out, there's no going back.
So the current proposed design of the access road has been through an independent stage 1 road safety audit. So the access road proposals and the access junction onto the A696 has done a preliminary stage 1 road safety audit, and that's come back with no inherent issues in the design. That will obviously be further reviewed when we get to the detailed design for the highway works, secured by condition. So in terms of the safety aspect of that, that's already covered, and we were keen to get that safety audit undertaken before we committed to the principle of the access road proposals, with them being on the highway and the access junction to the 696.
Happy with that answer? Councillor Dodd.
Yeah, just on that junction and safety, I live half a mile from this road. It is a very, very fast road. And when we pulled out yesterday, I thought the vision wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be. Because I live on that road, and in the summer, could be 2, 3, 4 times a week we hear the sirens going, mainly because of motorbikes. And they're not doing 100, they're doing 140 or 50, you know. And I've brought this up a number of times with the police. Will there, my question is, I know you want to come to that, will there be enough what I call warning signs of a quarry or wagons turning? Because my experience of wagons pulling out is that they're not the quickest. And a lot of us live on that road, live in fear in the summer constantly because of motorbikes. I know a councillor that lives near that road does not use that road for that very purpose, because it is quite a fast, dangerous road. And as I say, those at Kirk Welton will back me up. The sirens go all summer. So I just want to make sure there's enough safety and warning of if it goes through.
So in terms of on the A696 itself, the required visibility displays are achievable. There's a little bit of vegetation clear back to the north of the junction to achieve the required 215-metre visibility display for a 60-mile-an-hour road. And in terms of signage, the initial scheme put forward as part of the highways works includes advanced directional signs to north side Quarry, so effectively replacing the existing ones to West Hull with ones that say north side Quarry and West Hull. So there is appropriate advance warning of a junction that is accessing a quarry either side of the access to the U5012.
Any more questions? And it is a fast road, Councillor Dodd, because I pulled out after you yesterday and I couldn't keep up with you. Councillor Swinburne.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, first off, point of clarification. In the material that's going to be brought back into the site, there are 2 different references in the report. I'm sorry I haven't put the reference to the paragraphs down. But one of them says 800,000 tonnes, and another one says 800,000 metres cubed.
800,000 tonnes
sorry, 800,000 tonnes is approximately 800,000 metres cubed.
That would depend on the material, presumably.
Okay, I mean,
that's to give an average for waste management here.
Okay.
I think it's meant to be tonnes rather than metres cubed.
I think it's cubic.
Just for clarity.
All right, so right, I stand corrected. Kevin thinks it's 800,000 cubic metres.
Okay. So it's a volume.
But I mean, yeah, it doesn't, in the context of things, it doesn't make a huge difference, I don't think.
Okay, that's fine. One of the late objections was from Plant Life about some of the ecological matters. I think we've got ecologists here. So to start with, I'd just like to hear from the ecologists what their view on the robustness, essentially, of the ecological surveying, because they're making the point that they only did surveys in one season. So I'm interested to hear what the ecologist has to say on that point, please.
Thank you. So my name is Nadine Rolls. I'm the ecologist for Northumberland County Council that's worked on this application. And the document referred to is from Plant Life International, which is a renowned charity, and they've questioned the methodology for the survey of wax caps, which are an important fungi assemblage. And one of the issues with fungi is they don't necessarily fruit every year, so it can be difficult to pick up all of the different species within one survey season. So the applicant has done one survey season, whereas Plant Life is suggesting it should be over many years, and also using a technique called eDNA, which is a new unpublished technique that we in fact weren't aware of, so it's not something we could recommend that the applicant did. In terms of whether it was sufficient survey effort, in this case we consider it was, because the applicant, when they produced their ecological impact assessment, they took into account that limitation to the survey and put forward a conservative estimate of the value of the assemblage, so county level importance. And also in concluding the impacts in the ECI, they've recognised that there's a residual adverse effect to that wax cap assemblage.
Okay, thank you. So following on from that, with regard to the wax caps in particular, there's some discussion about relocation of those from the part that's going to be doped to part that's going to be restored. There seems to be some concern that, well, Plant Life say there's currently no widely accepted approach to successful wax cap translocation. I wondered what your response to that was.
That's correct. We agree with that. So it's really an untested methodology for translocating wax cap. We don't know how digging up the turf will affect them. But we were content to accept that because the area where that wax caps occur isn't going to be disturbed for another 15 years because of the way the development is phased. So we're happy that that gives us sufficient period of time for further monitoring and for further research into translocation techniques before they're moved. And we've added a planning condition to ask for ongoing management and monitoring of that period for the 15 years, and then in a year to 12 months prior to that translocation happening, then for the translocation methods to be agreed.
Okay, thank you. The next point I had was with regard to white-clawed crayfish. These are referred to as rare and most threatened species, and the Wansbeck river catchment is one of the places that they're still thriving, as I understand. So obviously this has been considered in some detail, but I was just looking at the Natural England guidance on how you make sure. So essentially this site is right at the headwater of the River Wansbeck. The streams run into Wansbeck, as I understand it. please correct me if I'm wrong. So obviously anything that goes downstream here is going to go downstream into the Wansbeck. So the Natural England guidance talks about things so that the people who are going into the water can do for biosecurity. So you don't transfer the crayfish plague or the invasive crayfish themselves into another catchment. So it talks about things like if you're a fisherman washing down all your gear, etc., drying it out. And it's,
Swinburne, can you ask the question?
well, I am asking the question because the guidance is check, clean, dry protocol. What it doesn't give me any information about is what you do with a wagon. A wagon which is coming from another catchment, they'll be coming from every catchment in the northeast, bringing in material onto this site, taking out material from this site. There will be wheel washers, but how in the middle of winter when the wagon is absolutely filthy and wet, it comes onto the site, it will go through a wheel wash on the site, and then it will leave. It will leave potentially some of the waterborne material, which is how the crayfish plague is transferred. It will leave it in the water on the site. They will be bringing material in to the site, the 800,000 cubic metres, will be coming from lots of different catchments, and water will be running off that. How do we know for sure that, and I see that biosecurity measures to ensure no accidental introduction of non-native species of crayfish plague disease will be used throughout the works? How will that work in a practical sense? If you're asking fishermen to dry their clothing before they go into another catchment, how are we dealing with a wagon?
Could I make a point here before I invite the ecologist in for a comment here? Can I just make a point of logic here in that you are interpreting the Natural England's advice on this? The appropriate person to come to the judgment on whether their own guidance is being followed is Natural England, and they have been heavily involved in this application and they have no objection to it. So as a starting point, you'll have heard me mention the issue of that where we have statutory consultees' comments, be those in opposition or no objection, that there needs to be cogent and compelling reasons to why we would not follow their advice. Given the point you are citing their own advice that they wrote and they have not objected to it, as a starting point, I think we need to trust Natural England's judgment on this. But I'll ask the ecologist to flesh out the detailed points of this.
Yeah. So we feel that the any transfer of material from the wagons would be fairly low risk because the vehicles aren't directly driving through watercourses and picking up materials. The biosecurity measures in terms of the clean, check, dry would apply more to personnel working on site, so particularly boots that might be entering watercourses or hand tools. So that it would apply that way, and we feel like the wheel wash would probably be sufficient. But that is, all the detail of that is still to be determined. We've asked for a planning condition for quite a detailed environmental management plan to pick up all these different measures, which is the same thing the Environment Agency had asked for.
Can I just, sorry, I'm hesitant to say this, Rob, but Natural England didn't consider the aspect that you're thinking about. Natural England's view on this application was it wasn't going to have significant adverse effects on statutorily protected nature conservation sites, and on such aspects as this, it deferred to the Environment Agency and the county ecologist. So what I've taken into account in writing this report is the view of the Environment Agency, who initially submitted a holding objection, and then when further information was submitted, they were satisfied on the various mitigation measures and on the detailed work that Nadine's done. In terms of materials to be imported into the site, it's the Environment Agency through its permitting that will have the major influence on that, and that process will also take into regard the Environment Agency's remit, including you know, to sort of towards the crayfish. So I mean, there's a sort of there's sort of 2 or 3 safeguards that hopefully, and we think, will address the issues that you've referred to.
Thank you. My final question is about the public right-of-way. Obviously, it's a public road and it's also part of the St Oswald's Way. We heard yesterday at the site visit, and we saw the proximity to the public right-of-way from where the quarry will be, and there will be blasting in the quarry. Are we confident that the blasting will not have a negative effect on users of the public right-of-way?
Well, there's public rights of way officer has sort of looked at the application and has raised no concerns. I mean, obviously the things like blasting, the fact that there is going to be a mineral site there, that there are going to be lorries associated with that mineral site, there sort of is going to be some impact, adverse impact on some of the enjoyment of some of the people that will use that public rights of way. I also know from experience that that sort of walkers actually get some enjoyment out of walking past quarries because it's a different sort of experience. So it's something that I think it's probably slightly adverse, but is it sufficient to sort of cause us great concern? The answer is no. In terms of the St Oswald's Way, it's only affected in the latter stages of the development. I think that's right. So I mean, it's something that we have considered, and you know, on balance, we think that there sort of wasn't a sufficient impact to be causing us concern or recommending refusal on these grounds.
My specific point really is it's not so much the visual or anything, other noise or whatever, is the safety aspect of people walking past and driving past. Has that been considered and looked at?
Well, I mean, in terms of the safety aspect, I think the main thing to do with safety on that road is that it tends to have good visibility. I mean, it tends to be long, straight stretches. You know, these are obviously aspects that the highway authority are going to have to be satisfied on when we start to discharge conditions on, you know, that sort of govern the sort of detailed construction of the road, of the passing places, and of the signage. But I mean, I think in broad terms, there is good visibility along the sort of length of that road. I mean, I don't know if Mark wants to say anything.
No, nothing extra to add, really. I suppose, you know, the public right of way is there. It was, you know, it was part of the. It would have been included in the RSA, the road safety audit, which in turn has the vehicle movements to inform their road safety audit assessment, and no such matters were raised in that road safety audit. So again, it'll be revisited at detailed design for a stage 2.
Yeah. Can I just come in very shortly? I think what Councillor Swinback is getting at is that is it safe to have a right of way next to an operation, close to an operational quarry that could include blasting operations? Okay. It is the absolute case that in certain circumstances for quarry applications, public rights of way are moved because they are deemed, you know, to be, you know, too close or, you know, at risk. This has been assessed, and it can be both uses can take place at the same time. Blasting at quarries is extremely heavily prescribed by regulation, and those images you may have in your head of ripple blasting from the States and material flying, blasting at quarry sites is a wholly uneventful activity nowadays, and actually as part of the community liaison group, it is normal to take residents around to actually watch one of those blasts, and it's generally a wholly underwhelming event. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, generally the quarries will have, like, and this is under the quarry regulations, will have a safety zone around each blast, and you have, you know, somebody appointed to be, you know, responsible person on site in charge of that blast. So, you know, they will need to ensure that there's nobody within that sort of safety zone, you know, during the blast. If that overlaps with areas just off-site, they'll need to make sure that there's nobody in there, and, you know, generally you would station sort of sentries along there to make sure that's clear, and you kind of give the all clear before the blast takes place. There's all those, you know, as Rob's mentioned, sort of checks in, but they come in with the other regulations rather than necessarily in the planning regs.
Thank you. That answers the question.
Thank you. Any more questions? Councillor Darby.
Just a quick question. What assessment, or if any, has been done on the transport to and from site, particularly through communities like Belsay and Ponteland, particularly in note to point 7.53, item F, to minimise the adverse impact on communities and the environment, including the noise assessment? That's likely to have a massive impact on those communities in Belsay and Ponteland. What can we do to mitigate that? And has there been any other transport routes explored to prevent vehicles going through that area?
I mean, as the report points out, the environmental health, I mean, Gillian's here. I don't think it was her that dealt specifically with this application, but the Environmental Health Department did sort of look at air quality aspects of the increased traffic going through Ponteland. So I mean, it has something that has been assessed and has been found to, again, you know, they had no objections to the sort of use of that road on air quality grounds. Highways have got no objections to the use of that road on sort of highways grounds. So I mean, it is something that we have looked at. We sort of have looked at the practicality of the operator using other routes, but it is, you know, the A696 is part of the strategic road network. I mean, if you were to start using other roads, you would actually be using roads that are less suitable for the sorts of traffic that we're talking about, and you know, would be going past other properties and sort of residents. You know, so I mean, it has been assessed from sort of both aspects.
Councillor Stewart.
It's shortened it really, because I was going to talk about routes there as well. 7 AM start. What I'm thinking about is the parish councillor from Ponteland put the considerations. Could we have lorries, say 6:30, trundling through Ponteland to get the site for 7? And how do the backup? Will the backup on the main road there? Will they allow access? Because there is a gate at the entrance there. And we spoke about 92 movements on Monday to Fridays and 30 plus 30 on a Saturday. That's obviously maximum, could be a lot less, and we're going to monitor that movement, are we?
In terms of the latter one, we recommended a condition obviously for those maximums because those are the numbers that have been assessed in the transport statement in the EIA. So anything more than that hasn't been assessed, so therefore we put that cap on. In terms of monitoring vehicle movements, there is a condition for a vehicle movement which they're required to keep, and that records all vehicle movements or heavy goods vehicle movements over the 7.5 tons entering and leaving, and that will also be used to calculate the rolling average 12-month movements, which is the limit for the rolling 12-month average that obviously moves through the life of the development site.
I mean, the sort of other point is that there is the sort of detailed improvements to the junction do include, as I said, you know, proposals to prevent lorries backing up and queuing. You know, so that what you're saying there would be completely unacceptable. If it ever happened, you know, we would be, you know, our monitoring and enforcement people would be stamping down on that immediately because it would be completely inappropriate. But the plans do allow for improvements to that junction in order to prevent that happening.
So you've got the stacking distance between the junction and the gate, which they propose to open at the beginning of the day, leave it open so you don't have, obviously, the heavy goods vehicles having to get out and open and shut the gate like we did yesterday. And we've included that in a condition for an operational management plan to set out how that's going to be undertaken during the lifetime of the development.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Could I just make a point on this? And
Is the question up?
it's a response. It's a response. It's a response to the questions. Okay. And one of the points made by the speaker in opposition was the perception that this proposal had been subject to a light levels of scrutiny, say compared with industrial applications. I just want to underscore the fact that this was an EIA application, which is an environmental impact assessment application, which means that, well, this is one part of the reasons why it's taken almost 5 years to deal with, because there's been a rolling process of technical studies on all aspects, and you'll see that in the report, from ecology to highways to landscape. And that's been an iterative process where some of the earlier proposals were not acceptable and were changed. And then the consequential implications on those on other elements of the scheme had to be evaluated, such that this scheme hasn't been a case of the applicant putting it in and us saying yes or no. This is the end product of a series of iterations of changes, including the capacity of the site and the landscaping and the importation of material, etc. So all of these things, as part of the EIA application, are subject to, this is an important point, are then subject to the triangulation of views from various statutory consultees, whether or not it's acceptable, and, this is a key part of the EIA approach, what mitigation is necessary to make it acceptable. So all that's been done, and the end product of all those, balancing all the different impacts and changes, has resulted in a scheme where there are now no statutory objections. There were earlier on, and some of the issues you've raised, including ecology particularly, was a subject of real concern, and issues over importation of material. However, this is the end product of that extended technical evaluation. Okay, so what we need to say as well is that because the EIA regulations are particularly, well, they are the highest, level of scrutiny for planning applications, that we are satisfied that the EIA process has been conducted in a way which means that we think it is appropriate now to recommend it for approval. Okay, we'll do that minuting that the EIA regulations have been complied with, and that the ES, the environmental statement, is fit for purpose now for making a decision on. Okay.
Thank you. I've got a quick question, Gordon. Community liaison group, where they're talking to the community. I think it's the way forward. I think every application, major application that we get, we should set something like this up. I'm fighting for them in my ward. I've had 2 in 3 years. Have we got a prescription? Have we got a, is it once a year? Is it once every 6 months? Is it once a quarter? Have we got a sort of timetable for these meeting things?
Well, it isn't really appropriate to have a template because I know you don't get open cast coal applications now, but if you take an open cast coal site that might only operate for 2 or 3 years, the actual level of activity, the intensity of activity is such that it might be appropriate to sort of have a meeting every couple of months or so. On a hard rock quarry, what we've stipulated here is having a minimum of 2 meetings a year. Now we think that on a hard rock quarry, that is probably appropriate. I mean, what's happened at Divot Hill was that what they've done there is initially they are meeting quarterly, and they are reaching the stage, having had liaison committees now for about 3 years, they are reaching the stage where it might be appropriate to actually go down and only have one every 6 months. So it very much depends. I mean, if a site is operating well, no problems, and it tends to be the same sort of thing happening week in, week out, the frequency of meetings is needed is less. If there are complaints, I mean, if we do find, that the operator isn't doing certain things right, as I said, it doesn't forgo complaints directly and having them immediately attended to, but that might be a reason for having more frequent liaison committees. So in this case, the condition talks about a minimum of 2 each year, and we think that's appropriate for a hard rock quarry. But if the quarry, once it's set up, parish council, county council, operator, local residents, if they think that more regular meetings are needed initially, then I don't see any reason why anyone would object to that.
Good, thank you. Okay then, I'm sorry it's members only. Let's have a proposal. Anybody? Councillor Flux.
Propose approval in line with recommendations, and I think the update as you put it.
Councillor Hutchinson? Second, Councillor Hutchinson. Do we want any debate on this? Anybody? No, we can't. We can't. We can't. It can't happen. I'm sorry, madam. Councillor Swinbank.
Thank you, Chair. I've listened carefully, and I do have grave concerns on the ecology side of things. And I know that process has been done. Everyone's doing their due diligence. So we have a quarry where we know that we have a 40-year supply of stone in the county. We need to provide a 10-year supply, I believe. And we are putting a quarry into the headwaters of the catchment of the Wansbeck. Just below here at Wallington, they've been working with the Wildlife Trust to try and do everything they can to support the white-clawed crayfish. It can be wiped out by this aquatic fungus, the clayfish plague, which is transported by anything that's wet from one catchment to another. This is already in the Coca catchment, so it's not very far away, and it's in other places as well. And I just feel that based on the fact that we don't desperately need this stone, on the precautionary principle, putting this quarry there, we've got 92 vehicle movements per day, 5 days a week for 20 years. We're bringing in 800,000 cubic metres of material from anywhere, which anybody wants to place here. If I just feel that the risk of wiping out the crayfish in the catchment is just too great. Everything is downstream of this site. Everything water-wise is downstream of this site. And I'm sorry, I can't support the application.
I need to clarify a point here, okay, just for factual accuracy, Chair, if that's okay. You talked about overall supply of mineral, and that issue was raised by many of the objection representations and the public speaker. At the examination in public into the local plan, we were asked to put in an additional site to add to the supply, and this site and those other sites were factored into the supply needed over the planned period to meet economic growth requirements in the county. Because it is also worth remembering that quarries are not one you can say, yes, we need one tomorrow. And as you'll see, this application has taken 5 years to go through. So the inspector, who was a mineral specialist, did look at the provision we made and said it would be necessary over the planned period for those sites. Indeed, he added on an additional site, and we had argued initially that it didn't need another one. But I think this is a key strategic question, actually. So, Kevin, should you just elaborate on that point?
Yeah, because the rationale really kind of doesn't necessarily come out of the land bank itself, because of, as you've rightly pointed out, the land bank's 41 years is measured kind of last year. So Northumberland as a whole has a large quantum of reserves on paper. It's just as sort of set out in paragraph 7.13 in the report, there are sort of various factors that impact on the availability of that resource and how that can supply into the market. That largely sort of relates to production capacity. So it's the capacity that each site's sort of able to, produce on an annual basis, and how that compares with the annual demand that's sort of forecast over the plan period. So sort of initially in that first part of the plan period, there's sufficient supply to be able to do that. But for the reasons sort of set out, as you get into the latter part of the plan period, that supply that's available from the sites that we've got currently starts to diminish, and you wouldn't be able to achieve that supply level on an annual basis as a result of that. So that's factors like some of the quarries that we have at the moment. The reserves are projected to be sort of worked out within those individual sites at the moment, so that obviously would affect the production capacity of that site. There are sites which are inactive at the moment, so they're not able to sort of produce, and there was a lot of uncertainty when we were preparing the plan about whether they'd actually be able to contribute. So I guess in essence that was the reasoning behind the allocations in the local plan. I think it's also sort of worth pointing out, which I think Gordon mentioned in his presentation, the MPPF also seeks to avoid kind of a large reserve being bound up in a limited number of sites. And again, I think that was the reasoning behind the allocations in the local plan. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dodd.
Yeah, I've got concerns similar to Councillor Swinbank, but on a different scale, because there are things downstream here, and it's called my 2 or 3 parishes with people in them who, the reason they've objected is quite plain. There are issues at Belsay with the traffic and the schools and HGVs at certain times. It's a big issue. So that's why they've objected. I mean, I take all the points. It's a through road. I live near it. I know it. And it's been to the fact that, I know someone's put forward alternative routes, and that's just not going to happen. You can't say that this breeding wagons come from certain quarries and another one. It's just not. It's not. And it is the third route into Scotland. However, Ponteland is used as a bit of a crossroads for a lot of the traffic that comes down this A696. They either head up North Road to go to Cramlington and all places, or they go straight into Newcastle or Tyneside, or they head west to the A69. So the traffic issue is one of the problems that I have an issue with, and the people I represent have an issue with. And I'll come to the Kirk-Welbington ones. I always have this yardstick that if you buy a house next to a pub, and in a while you complain about the pub, the noise or whatever, you knew when you bought that house that there was a pub next door and a business, etc. But this is Kirk-Welbington. And I have family at Barrisford. And I was up there the other day, and they probably don't hear it. But because we had this application coming, there is a hum, a noise, and this is about the same distance away from the site to the village of Barrisford. And there is a noise, but I think it's like everything, you get used to it. But I noticed it. So on those 2 or 3 facts, I cannot accept this, although I hear what the people are saying, but I also hear what other people downstream from this are saying. It's not going to be the be-all and end-all, and 100 movements a day is not going to change the world. But when do you stop putting straws on the camel back?
No, yeah. Chair, so if I just can remind members of the National Planning Policy Framework's advice in this regard, and I think you made some really good points there, and any economic activity generates traffic. Okay, right. There are 2 issues to do with traffic, fundamentally. That's volume of traffic on the network, which is a capacity issue, and with that comes noise and disturbance. And there is the road safety issue. Okay. What the National Planning Policy Framework tells us in coming to decisions is that if we're looking at capacity, in other words, volume of traffic, there has to be a severe impact. Okay. And it may reach a point where, if additional developments were proposed, that threshold could be reached. The guidance is also clear, though, that for road safety audit purposes, there is sort of no acceptance of danger. In that, you do a road safety audit, and if it says this is safe, subject to these changes, that is okay. If it says it isn't, then it isn't. Okay. Here, though, we have to be consistent about this, because every time we apply for a new school or a new hospital even, there will be increased traffic. So the test is over severe impact, okay? And here, this has been through, as I said, for a 5-year process of looking at this. And if the Highway Authority thought there was going to be a severe impact or a road safety danger, it would have said so in this. And this, they are clear that they are now happy with it. So the issue is that we would be arguing against ourselves to say there was a severe impact here. It doesn't feel like, I'll ask Matthew to come on this for a general take on this. Are we approaching a severe highway impact here, or is this mitigated and is okay, or are you confident that this wouldn't reach the threshold, given the numbers and the location of a severe impact?
Yeah, I think given the numbers, and obviously the HGV routes are spread throughout the day, so again with capacity you're very much looking at peak hour. Obviously Ponteland does have the issues at peak hour, but spread over the day you're not going to tick that severe impact test under MPPF to recommend refusal on capacity. In terms of your daily capacity of the A696, it's well below its design capacity, if you like, if it was a standalone single carriageway 60 mile an hour road. So the link capacity during the day is fine, and the impact at those points where the network does start to struggle doesn't constitute a severe impact.
Thank you. Councillor Wallace.
Chair, I'll be honest, I wasn't going to say anything on this. I fully understand where my colleagues are coming from. However, I think what the officers are making very clear in the round, looking at everything, I will be supporting this application. But when you mention severity, we give planning permission for SSE, the early application, and one of the conditions was road monitoring. Nobody mentioned that road's a C road. You know how close I live to that C road. And at one time we had 2,000 HGVs per day coming along that C road. Now that's what you call severe. Not 42, 2,000. And in my tenure here in the County Council, we're given planning permission for British Vault, which would have 3,000 jobs on site, the data centre, which will hopefully have hundreds on site, NSL converter, and now another converter, and JTR cables on a C-class road. Accessed residents on U-class roads. So honestly, I'm not convinced with the severity of the HGVs, which the report clearly states will be 20 tonne and 30 tonne. I must point out, on that C-class road, they're 40 tonne. That's a massive difference. And don't worry about the white crayfish. They've survived very nicely in Camas, in the Wansbeck estuary, following many, many storms, when sadly sheep, cows, and all kinds of things over recent storms is washed by them. It's the American crayfish you've got to watch about, so perhaps tongue-in-cheek, we better watch what QTS bring from America when they build the data centre.
Can I just be clear to everyone in the room, what we're not talking about here, so we're clear, is we are not saying that people will not notice the difference in traffic, right? But we have to ask ourselves, does that reach a point that is unacceptable? And to do that, we need to be able to justify it. And if we refuse on that basis, we would have to argue to appeal the evidence we'd used to come to the conclusion that the highway impact was severe. And what we're saying is that we're not saying that you won't notice the traffic as you would do with, say, building a new anything. We're saying that this has been evaluated at great length. Hence, I'll keep saying it, I'm not happy with that application taking almost 5 years to determine in terms of our performance figures. But this one has been absolutely through every element in extensive detail. More so probably than any application you've had, I would say, for the last 2 years at this committee, in terms of the level of scrutiny it's been put under.
I mean, I think it's the same thing as Rob is talking about applies to sort of other aspects. I mean, at the end of the day, to refuse planning permission, you need to have grounds to refuse planning permission. So, yes, there are concerns. It's a quiet area. There's concerns about noise, but all the government guidance says that this site can be worked within the noise limits that are acceptable for mineral working. All the government guidance says that there is no impact on dust beyond 400 metres from a site, and that the main impact is within 100 metres of a site. And with good management controls, strict planning conditions, then these impacts shouldn't happen. There are no statutory agency objections from the ecologist to the Environment Agency to the crayfish issue or the other ecological issues. So I mean, if you are going to refuse it, you need grounds for refusal. You need grounds that are going to stand up to at appeal and to scrutiny. And I mean, all I'm saying is that from my perspective, having taken over this case, I just can't see that the grounds are there. That the need is established. The restoration of the site back to existing contour levels is a better solution than restoring it with a deep void. And the sort of various impacts can be mitigated, can be controlled, and I just can't see any grounds for refusing it. I'm sorry.
Just a minute. Officers, can I just remind you, this is members' debate. It's not members to be led one way or another. Okay? Councillor Darwin.
Thank you. I agree with the need for this site. I agree with the constraints that you can put on site. I agree with the requirement for the quarry and all the rest of it. I'm not just going to dispute that. It is the impact on the residents of where they travel to and from site. That is what I represent. I live in the centre of Ponteland. Now, if you know Ponteland, where they have traffic lights right in the centre, there's about a mile stretch towards the airport. If you drive out of Ponteland, that junction is blocked up from the traffic lights back up to Dobby's roundabout. That's nearly a mile stretch of HDVs, of cars, of everything. Going to Otterburn, going to the army camp, going wherever it can go. You say, and this is not, when does it reach severe, that these vehicles going through this community? For me, it is already severe. A mile tailback, I think, is severe. Adding one more to that is gone beyond severe. So that impact of severe, who measures that severity? I'd say the residents living in Ponteland measure that severity and think it is already severe. I know it is only 46 vehicles to 46 vehicles from 92 more per day. You mentioned a good management control. That's an average rating. We don't know how many that can be a peak in one day. There is no good management control in my view of this. It's an average rated, which I think the applicant will record. I don't know how that's recorded, but they can record that, and I don't know how that's controlled. So I get it's not a severe amount for the site, but I see the tailbacks through Ponteland. I see these vehicles going through Ponteland all the time, and it is a severe impact on residents of that area. It's not just the noise, the dust that comes with that, it's the whole access of vehicles through that. And I understand, paragraph 763 saying that other routes have been explored, and that's not viable. But for me, as a representative of Ponteland, this route is not viable either, and I cannot support this on the grounds of going through Ponteland. I think it is severe.
Thank you. Any more? Any more for debate? I would just counter that argument, Councillor Darwin, by saying there's nothing to say they're all going to go that way. In fact, if a lot of that stuff goes to the data centre, they're not going to go that way. You know, we can't say it really. And I think it was up to 46. It wasn't. It's not going to be 92. Might be 100, but it might just be 40 a day.
Well, that's the average rate.
Yeah, we don't know. So, are we happy? We've debated it. Councillor Flux, do you want to sum up?
I think that Councillor Wallace put it very, very well. I don't particularly have more to add. I stuck my hand up because someone's got to be brave enough to do it sometimes. In the grand scheme of things, it's all about balance. And I think that what I read in the report puts the balance, in my opinion, towards approval rather than refusal on this application. As simple as that. Now, I could speak a lot longer on that, but I think if you're just gonna, you've got to put in, you know, the very fine lines in planning. But sometimes when you've got the evidence in front of you, you've got to take what you've got on your report. So that's why I proposed approval, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Flux. We'll go to the vote then. All those in favour of the application? All those against? And abstentions? One abstention.
What was that number? Can you just...
Thank you very much.
4, 2 against, 1 abstention.
Yeah. Just remember, there's an appeals update in your pack and urgent business. I haven't been notified of any. That's it then. Thank you much for your